We love accidental website leaks. They're always such a blessing. It's always fun to see just like the machinations of these giant corporations kind of breaking down, the curtain slips for a second. Some intern or like social media manager or something responsible for like the menial task of updating the website and writing the little blurb, but then they had the paper of the upcoming movies. They're like, why did you put the Mario? But it's on the paper of upcoming movies. You didn't tell me that there were movies. No, but who gave him that paper? That was the wrong paper. You got the paper marked this. You were supposed to use paper marked that. And then it's just endlessly amusing to me that these things tend to happen. There is no perfect company. Professionalism overall is just kind of an illusion. It's not really a thing. So anyway, the NBC Universal website updated and had a little blurb talking about some upcoming movies, and one of the upcoming movies it mentioned was the upcoming Mario movie, which is coming out about a year now. We're about a year away. That year is going to go by quick. I bet before we know it, we're going to be watching the movie. I'm excited. And, Nintendo has not revealed the name of the next Mario movie. If I were going to guess, I haven't really thought about it, but if I was going to guess, say something along the lines of like the Super Mario Brothers movie 2? I don't know. Just off the top of my head. But no, according to this information, which was posted to the NBC Universal website and later removed, which is always, not necessarily confirmation, but I don't know. There's always that little moment where you just kind of like, all right, yep, there it is. They found the guy. They took him out. But according to the website, the name of the movie is Super Mario World. You heard that right. Super Mario World, not the Super Mario Brothers movie 2 game, but Super Mario World. And of course, this, because it is not an official announcement, even if this did come from an official source, it doesn't technically mean that it is absolutely confirmed and that's what it's going to be. It is technically subject to change, and those kinds of things do happen. Sometimes movie names can change fairly close to release if for just some reason they think it's going to be a problem. The Village, M. Night Shyamalan's The Village. I remember that was going to be called The Woods, but then a different movie came out that was called The Woods, so they had to change it to The Village. And so you never know. Someone else may put out a movie, so it's possible that, Nintendo is about to reveal the movie, and then it turns out that some other company has just put out a movie called Super Mario World. Oh no, everyone at Nintendo is panicking. What are we gonna do? We gotta change the name. Anyway, so Super Mario World, I will say, this has some of that, really just classic, that warm, fuzzy, nostalgic, classic Nintendo naming confusion. It's the kind of thing where I feel like they should have grown out of it by now. They figured out with Switch 2, let's not make it confusing. It's not Super Switch, it's not Switch U. But when it comes to the Mario movie, I don't know, it's just Super Mario World. So now, it's an SEO thing, Now when I type Super Mario World, it can mean two different things, which is a little bit frustrating. Again, it's like Muppets. Darn Disney. They release a movie in 2011. They don't call it the greatest Muppet movie ever made or whatever the original Jason Segel title was. No, they call it The Muppets. So now whenever I want to reference that movie, I'm going to say Disney's parentheses 2011 The Muppets. You can't just say them. Oh, and then later there's ABC's The Muppets, because they make a show and it's also just called The Muppets. Come on! It's hard to talk about this stuff. So anyway, let's get past that. It's gonna be called Super Mario World for better or worse. And of course, it does make sense. It really absolutely does. Obviously, the first movie, it rushed through the plot. That's one of the main criticisms. It just kind of moves, and it's kind of basic. It really is just kind of there's a Bowser and a Peach and a Mario, and then they fight, and then that's kind of it. There's still so much Mushroom Kingdom to explore. Like, absolutely. I mean, there's a long, long history of games. Not to say that they're going to dip into, like, the more obscure stuff, but even just in the basic Mario universe, there are just so many locales that they could explore. I mean, a whole entire chunk of a movie can take place in any, more stuff in the ice place, or like a whole entire desert sea. There's just a ton. It's Mario. There's so much material to pull from. And of course, they established the whole warp pipe thing where, warp pipes lead all over the kingdom, but then one of the warp pipes also leads to to New York, to Brooklyn, the real world, or whatever. And then, of course, Nintendo themselves haven't really said much about the movie, but, Miyamoto, when they first announced it, he mentioned broadening Mario's world further. So, there's this idea of, like, making it bigger. So instead of going Mario 2, you jump immediately to Mario World, and then because it shares a name with a game, you have that familiarity. People hear that name, and it's not just suggestive of a bigger experience, but it's also just like, oh, I played Super Mario World. Oh, nostalgia. Oh, I felt that one right in my heart. That's what Nintendo wants. And then, of course, what game was Yoshi introduced in? Super Mario World. What's the end credits little teaser at the end of the first movie? It's Yoshi. So it all makes sense. My question at this time is, how big are they going to go with it? Because the whole warp pipe thing, to me, that is like, that's the crossover right there. You know what I mean? We're never going to get a full Smash movie, but I do think at least some crossover goodness can be expected from some future movies, and the key is the warp pipes. These warp pipes can go wherever Nintendo wants, and that includes other Nintendo kingdoms. Again, I'm not expecting like a big, humongous cross. I did a whole entire video on this. Nobody watched it, but I did a big video speculating all of the movies that we can expect for Nintendo through the end of time, so I'm not going to go into all of it here. But yeah, basically, like, I don't expect a full Smash movie. I don't know if the audience is there for it, but I do think that eventually bringing in at least little bits of other Nintendo properties just makes sense business-wise. They're not going to make a whole Kirby movie. There aren't enough, like, people to watch it. But, like, they could bring in Kirby to, like, expose the billion trillion people who are going to come to see these movies to the property, cross-promotional. It just makes sense. I think. I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe they'll keep Mario movies just Mario forever and keep it all to just, like, little cameo, Pikmin statues on the desks and whatnot. We'll see. But basically, if this is Mario World and they're really exploring the bigness and the warp pipes and stuff, could that mean that we could see some crossover stuff in this movie? It is possible. However, this only being the second movie, it's probably more likely that they are still going to want to pretty much stick largely to Mario. If I had to guess, and I love to guess, so I will. I would say that if they do end up doing the little warp pipey crossover, oh, like Kirby came through the pipe, I would say that's going to happen during the post-credit scene of this next movie. I see this next movie really blowing up the Mario world, bringing us to all of these different places, really just kind of like giving us a much more full Mario movie experience, probably rely a little bit less on all of the just like, references and visual gags and nods and stuff. I love that stuff. I think it was really fun. But sure, it'd be nice if they didn't have to rely on that quite so much. Dig a little bit deeper into the actual Mario lore or whatever. And then at the end of that movie, you tease the crossover. And then the third movie, that's when you start bringing in other Nintendo characters. I'd love it if it was like a full movie like that, It could even be, like, again, I go over in the whole thing. It could be like Smash, a Mario Brothers movie. Would they bring in all these other characters as an integral thing to the plot? That really would basically be a big Smash Bros. Movie. That would be amazing. I don't know. Or is it just going to be cameos? They're flowing through the warp pipes and it's panning to all the different worlds. And then at one point, they go through the pipe and then it's Kirby and he looks up and he waves at them. And then that's it. That's the cameo. That would still be pretty darn cool. Whatever the case, though. I'm probably getting my hopes up for crossover stuff, but I think if it happens, end credits of the next movie. And yeah, I don't know. That's that. And then I do have to wonder, you know, they're ditching the numbers thing. They're not doing Mario Movie 1 and 2. They're going straight to Mario World. I, of course, have to wonder what the future looks like, you know, in the games. I mean, you know, the names are not incremental. It's not just like bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, you could say there's land to world and then, oh, and then world to galaxy. Yes, they could just make a Super Mario Galaxy movie. In fact, I think that makes perfect sense, you know. You take it out of the Mushroom Kingdom and you make it more about, like, space. You bring in Rosalina. That would make a fine movie. So maybe that's what they'll do. But if not, yeah, like, where do you go after World? How do you name your movies if you're not using numbers? And, you know, they do have the games to draw upon. Again, Galaxy or Odyssey. Super Mario Odyssey just is a great name. But then that's going to be a little bit less familiar, not quite as much of a nostalgia thing where, like, Super Mario World, that's a definite thing. I don't know. And we also cannot rule out the idea that Nintendo has not thought that far ahead and that maybe they don't even want to do that many movies. They're Nintendo. They're funny. Why did it take them this long to do a Mario movie in the first place? I don't know. So for all we know, they'll do 2 and they'll just be like, that's it. And we'll be like, what? What do you mean? You just made 2 movies. They made $1 billion each. You could just pump them out and make $1 billion extra dollars every 3 years. And they could just be like, I don't know. You know, Miyamoto could just be like, I don't have a good idea. And that's it. That's Nintendo. If we don't have a good idea, then that's it. You know, maybe after that, they do Super Mario World, and then they do, like, the DK movie, and then they do the Luigi's Mansion movie, and I don't know. Maybe they just really haven't thought that far ahead. I don't know, though. Could sit here and speculate all day. Point is, Super Mario World. We will be watching Super Mario World in about a year. Yeah, really just about a year. That's fun. That's fun. I'm looking forward to it. I liked the movie. I liked it. I thought it was fun.